Question of the day. What is your favorite chess-like game? Now, when I say that, that's a pretty broad genre because I'm thinking of things like Onitama, Santorini, games in which you're playing with a set of figures in which you're manipulating the board or on the board in order to take your opponents off the board, whether it be momentarily or permanently, in order to gain points or score a win. Because today we're talking about Mythic Mischief. It is a faction-based game in which you are trying to score 10 points or score the most points by the time the Tome Keeper has discovered you or discovered the other player. But the point is, what is your favorite chess-like game? Let me know in the comments below. Now, today we're talking about, like I said, Mythic Mischief. It is a faction-based game with all sorts of factions. You've got zombies, you've got vampires, witches, wizards, all sorts of different things based on fantasy mythic characters. And you're moving around the board, manipulating the board in order to score points. So let's take a look at how it plays. We'll come back up, talk final thoughts right now. Alright, this is Mythic Mischief set up, roughly. Now, the setup's going to change depending on which of these before lunch cards you take. You're going to place the 1, 2, and 3 markers as noted on the board here. The circle spaces are going to be the starting spaces you can start on. We're going to be in the middle of a game right here, so don't worry about the starting spaces right now. And then you're going to put tomes out. Both players will put tomes out onto these tome spaces. That's what these little tokens are. The goal of the game is to get the Tome Keeper, this really great miniature here, got a giant sack of books on his back, to see one of the other players. And then that player will be pulled off the board till the next round and you'll get a point for that. First person to 10 points wins the game. Now, on your turn, there's several phases. First is the Mythic Phase. In the Mythic Phase, you're going to spend your actions. Now, the way you do this, you have a setup over here. Now, these are faction specific. So we have the witches here, the wizards over there. I believe there's trolls, there's ghosts, there's zombies. All sorts of different factions who do have different powers. Now, they're going to play pretty similarly because essentially you're going to be manipulating the board by moving walls around, by moving your player, by moving the other players around. There are ways to manipulate it. Now, you're going to have certain powers that are available from the beginning. And your setup is your dice pips, the numbers, are going to be based on what the column is above them. But they get placed in that column based on if the first open slot. So, for instance, we don't have Manifest available to us yet, because we do not have a tome here. Now, because this player would go second, they would start with the tome down here, and then they would get to place one additional tome out of their choice. Now, Carla placed hers here for, this is Distract. Now, the Distract power allows you to pull the Tome Keeper one space towards you. Let's kind of go through this. So, the movement points here, we would have 3 points of movement, and that's 2 spaces for a normal move, and then one move per space normally, and 2 moves per moving through this clutter here. So as you move through the clutter, that would be 2 points. So you would take this die, spin it down to 0. Then, if you wanted to, you can move the additional space. Now there's a benefit to not moving because you're going to move your die back to the appropriate slot. You're going to reset it at the end. But essentially what you're going to be doing is trying to spend these points to make the Tome Keeper see them. Now again, everybody has different powers and abilities as explained in their powers and abilities cards right here. It tells you every single power. So for instance, this would be the trolls. They can drag, move an adjacent ally or enemy into a space that a troll or mythic has just moved out of. So you're essentially dragging them. You can smash through walls by removing adjacent library spaces. Legendary launch, move a neighbor ally as far as you want, orthogonally or diagonally. So interesting stuff. Now there's also after lunch powers that you would get down here in the bottom right only after lunch. And the way after lunch works is once players have taken their turns, the Tome Keeper is going to move, and it's going to move based on this number here, 4. And it's going to move the easiest route to get to the spaces numbered. So our path currently would be 1, 2, 3. And if they land on a spot with the Tome Keeper, if the Tome Keeper lands on a spot with a player, that player is pulled off, the other player gets a point. Essentially what you're going to be doing is manipulating the board so that your opponent loses players each round, and they'll respawn at the beginning of the next round, and you'll gain the points for that. It's pretty straightforward. Now, everybody's powers are different, but that's what you're going to be doing. Moving around, manipulating the board, grabbing tomes. Now, when you grab a tome here, you're going to get a chance in the cleanup phase to move your stuff up and make it better. So the Tome Keeper phase, they'll move. If the Tome Keeper catches an opponent, the other one gains a point. If the Tome Keeper catches you, you lose a point. So you have to be careful and know which way the Tome Keeper is going to go and manipulate that path based on moving these walls around. Now, the one thing you cannot do is you can't completely wall off an area where there's no entrance in or out. So if you were going to do a move that would do that, you're not allowed to make that move. Okay, then once the cleanup phase happens, you're going to slide all used dice to the left. Then you're going to, if you have tomes, you can boost with the tome by adding a tome, kind of like we did here, to make a die base level better. Or if you don't have any, you still get to boost 2 dice. Now that means 1 2 spaces or 2 1 space or whatever, but the point is you get to boost a die in that cleanup phase. So as it shows right here. Right here, you can boost 2 abilities. So you can boost an ability, move 1 die 1 space to the right. If you boost the move ability, only move 1 to the left. You may choose to boost the same ability twice. So essentially, you're just making your next turn better by boosting, but the tomes are going to be a permanent one. So if you land in a space with a tome, you're going to keep that. If you're still in that space, you're going to keep it at the end of the round. So that's how the game plays. It changes after the Tome Keeper hits 1, 2, 3. You'll flip over the after lunch card, and then there should be 1 number here that he's trying to get to. Or there's 3 numbers, but once he gets all 3, the game will end, and the person with the most points wins as well. But it also changes some things set up for the board, but it also unlocks everyone's after lunch power. That's how you play Mythic Mischief. So that's Mythic Mischief. Pretty straightforward game with some twist in the fact that every player has individual powers. Now you can learn to master a certain character, obviously, but at the end of the day, you're moving on the board and manipulating walls and trying to get your opponent seen by the Tome Keeper and not yourself. You don't want to lose points. So let's look at how the game looks. First of all, the game looks tremendous. It is a beautiful game. The art style is great. I like the cutesy choice, and I'm not normally one to say that, but it works here. But I also love the individual characters. They look so good. I mean, the fact that they don't all look exactly alike in each faction is also really cool. Not to mention they just look good in general. The game trays is amazing. The iconography and art, it can be a little tricky sometimes because some things mean adjacent and some things mean just move it. And you have to kind of go back and forth. What does that symbol mean again? Now, granted, every player has a nice player guide. Some of them are in the rule book. Some of them are individual. So there is that. So it is quick to quickly find out what things mean. However, if you don't have a baseline of what any of the symbols mean, you're going to be looking it up the first few times. But once you've played it a few times, you'll get it. How does the game play? It is pretty straightforward. Yes, you're manipulating the board in one of 2 ways, by moving characters or moving things on the board. Now, yes, you can do some pretty cool abilities like teleport across the board depending on which players you're placing, or sling an opponent across the board depending on who you're playing again. But it is pretty straightforward. It's a little simple, and here's my only gripe with the game. It is kind of long at times. Like it says 45 to 90 minutes, but it does feel it. Oh, I scored 1 point. Oh, I went around without scoring any points. Now, granted, it will end once the Tome Keeper's reached all those spaces, but sometimes you can block the Tome Keeper, make him go really long to get to those spaces. So the game can drag a little bit. Positive points for the game. It's beautiful looking. It's great, just a spectacle to look at. Really, really looks good. Really well made. My downside is it is somewhat simplistic in what you're doing, in the sense that you're getting that Onitama Santorini feel, but it's much longer than those two. So it detracts from me a little bit. Mythic Mischief is a solid 7 for me. It's a great looking game. Fun to play. With the right audience. This was one that can make people angry quickly, so know your opponent and just have fun with it. But the variety is there, the art is there, can drag a little bit. That is Mythic Mischief. I'm Bryan Drake here on the Dice Tower. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, etc. at Dice Tower Bryan. But most importantly, the Dice Tower store is open. Make sure to check it out at dicetowerstore.com. Store some amazing merch. And as you're watching this, we've put up some even new shirts and things that are on there. So those orders will be going out as soon as we get everything in and shipped. But we cannot wait to go on this merch journey with you. I'm Bryan Drake. See you next time.